Welcome, everyone, to the Cardano Effect podcast, episode 30. The purpose of this podcast is to take high-level developer information and projects that are occurring within the Cardano space and break them down into bite-sized, consumable pieces of information for everyday use. I'm your host, Philippe, and let's get this podcast started. So Rick is on as well, so it's Rick and Philippe today. Sebastian is not with us, but he'll be joining us soon. I wanted to go over some quick housekeeping before we start this episode. We wanted to get right into the mix of things. If you missed episode 28, we had Hoshoshi on, Forrest, and we had a great episode with him. And episode 29, we had Umed and Elliot. So we talked about the economics behind ADA and Cardano. That was a great episode if you missed it. So go ahead and check it. If you're watching this and you are not subscribed, please consider subscribing to the Cardano Effect channel. We are growing, but we want to grow as fast and as rapidly as possible and really build our fan base and our people that are support us. So we really appreciate all the help. We really appreciate all the comments, the likes. Please keep on following us on Twitter and various other social media platforms. We have a lot of guests in store, and we're excited to bring everyone to you. So that being said, I also wanted to thank Christian. So he's one of the guys behind the scenes who's helping us produce these episodes. They take a lot of work, and we have a small team that is making sure that everything goes right. So thank you, Christian. We appreciate you. That being said, none of what we say on this podcast is financial advice or should be taken as such. You are your best financial advisor, and if you don't think you are, you need to find someone who's qualified to do so. That being said, Rick, how are you doing today? What's going on?
Hey, Philippe, I'm doing great, and thanks for asking. Hope you're doing good as well. I'd also like to give a shout out to our audio technician, Kyle. He's a college student who puts together the podcast portion. It makes this podcast available on Google Play Music, Spotify, iCloud, and iTunes. So you can get this podcast in audio only. And I would like to go right into our podcast here, introducing Mr. David Esser, who's a senior product manager of Cardano at IOHK. And Mr. Esser comes with a lot of experience here. He was an entrepreneur and a co-founder of 2 successful companies and was a chief technology officer for 13 years. So let's pass the mic over to David. Can you tell us about yourself and how you got involved with Cardano, David?
Yeah, guys. Yeah, so I'm the product manager of Cardano. Might be useful just to talk a little bit about what is a product manager, and so we can start there, and then maybe I'll tell you a little bit about a little bit of background, and we can go more into Cardano. So, yeah, product is about what a product should do. What should we build? And so you need to be focused on who are the people you're trying to serve, what those people need, how we're going to meet those needs, and then once we know how we're going to meet those needs, how is the way we're meeting those needs better than how someone else might be meeting those needs. And so that's what product is. And to differentiate that from project management, they can overlap quite a bit, and sometimes product management will own that function. But project management is about managing the tasks to deliver the functionality. And so we do have project managers at IOHK and in Cardano, and we collaborate really, really closely. Their help allows me to be more focused on the details of exactly what the product should do, and worry a little bit less about tasks and milestones and exactly how we're slotting work into the development effort. And so that helps a lot. It's a really big product and a really big effort, and so it's important to have the time to focus more on what it exactly should be doing in terms of functionality.
Okay, good. Thank you. And I did get a question on Telegram where someone asked me, what product do you actually manage? And the answer to that is Cardano, right?
Yeah, definitely. I'm more or less entirely focused on Cardano. We do have some other teams, and there's no silo. I talk to those folks, but I don't manage those efforts, and so we collaborate. And if I can help a little bit, that's fine. But mostly those teams are managing their own efforts. So I'm on the Cardano product.
I have a quick question about, you made a delineation between product manager and a project manager. So when you're communicating with the project managers, how are you delivering your products? Do they have a certain sequence that they're using, that they're communicating with you? I know with project management, you could use like methods like waterfall technique or the agile technique, and basically meaning how you're going to deliver certain products, whether it's going to be sequential or multiple different projects happening at the same time. I've noticed with Cardano, there's a lot of things going on. You have KEVM, Yella, Plutus, Marlowe. So is it more iterative, or is it more like sequential for you as far as the product releases?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question in IOHK and for Cardano, and the answer is a little bit of both. And so I'll tell you how and why. And so you guys already know from prior discussions that a big part of the approach that IOHK has taken on Cardano and other projects is this kind of formal methods, evidence-based approach. And so that involves a lot of research up front. Those are scientists and academics researching how we might approach something and trying to write mathematically provable approaches for doing that. So mathematically provable specifications. And once you finish that research, however, you need to do some experimentation to figure out what you could actually build. And so then you enter into a prototyping phase where you try to build in code what you theorized in scientific papers. And so you don't get a shippable product out of a prototyping effort. What you get is a kind of an understanding of what you can build and how it would work. And so after prototyping, then you need to start getting into engineering specifications where you would actually design the specifics of the way you would build it. And in addition, product specifications where you get down into the details. And this is kind of an interesting thing because the product function in terms of having a team to address it is a little bit new at IOHK. And so you might say, well, why? Why would that be new? It's a question I had coming in. And so it's interesting. This company has spent years and a lot of money and time on the details and the rigor of that formal methods process. But as it turns out, even though there's an enormous amount of what you could call specification and the documentation of details in that upstream formal methods approach, there's a piece of that. There's a piece of that specification which normally happens with a product manager in an interaction with development teams where you're figuring out how could we do that and how much detail should we put into that feature and how complex should we go early on, versus doing something complicated in the beginning against a different approach of adding complexity later on like an onion. And so some of those pieces didn't happen, and it's the reason for some of the challenges we've had, and we're trying to put those in place. So so I'm trying to help to do that. We're adding some specifications where they needed to be, and also trying to get ahead of the next wave of things that we're building. And so to get back to your question, within Cardano, some of it's waterfall, because clearly you've got to do some upstream research before you get into prototyping, and you have to do prototyping before you get into the build. And we also, when we're building, if we're building against a very explicit engineering spec, we want to build exactly there. But the reality is that often when you're building brand new technology, these are things that have never existed before. So it's not just it's not a marketing website for a bottle of shampoo, right? This hasn't been done before, very much at least. And so as we're building things, we discover realities about the limitations of technology and how it needs to be built. And that process needs to get cycled back into the design process. And so that's where we get a little bit more agile, because we have to adjust to the realities of the technology as we start to build it. And so this kind of starts out waterfall and ends up a little bit more agile, but we still try and make sure that the actual implementation is aligned with the provable specification that we started with. So a little bit of both.
That sounds like you have a big challenge there, because it's like you have multiple and sequential waterfalls all going on at the same time with all these different products, which it kind of leads me to the question that I had early on. Now, you've been at IOHK for about 3 months now, is that right?
Yeah, since late January.
Yeah, so you've been there about 3 months now. For the last year, people that are following Cardano, the roadmap was kind of rough and bumpy, and there was a lot of times things weren't delivered on the roadmap, or at least within the expected time frame that people were looking forward to. And so, with you coming onto IOHK, what was like the biggest challenge that you really had to wrap your hands around so that you could take on this product management role?
Yeah. So there's a little bit, there's multiple things. And so in terms of challenges, part of it is there are some specific things that maybe need some really detailed specifications, really down in the guts of how should a specific piece of functionality work. And those needed some immediate efforts. And so, and those are ongoing. But as a product manager, you also want to be doing broader stuff. You want to be looking globally and seeing, well, across all the functionality we're building, and keep in mind, we're talking about like 7 teams, right? Across all the stuff we're building within Cardano, have we specified those pieces to the level of detail needed to make sure we know exactly where we're going, and trying to get back to all of those places to make sure that we're aiming at the right target. So the team is whip smart. People are super capable and super passionate about both quality and deadlines. But sometimes, because we didn't get written down in enough detail, sometimes we weren't able to know exactly the target we were aiming at. And then as far as deadlines, it's just hard. It's been a question I've asked myself a lot. That translation from research and formal methods approach down to specific functionality, that's really hard. That's a hard jump to make. And so that's where quite a number of the challenges are. And then the other challenge is, well, if you're building brand new functionality, it's never been done before in the world, and you might have really smart, really expert people who've broken that apart into a bunch of pieces. You know, a piece looks like it might take a week, and then you dig into it and it doesn't. It could take 2 months, and this just happens sometimes. It's the reality of building something that's never been built before. So I'm not trying to make excuses. This is just the reality of our life. And if you ask us what's going on, that's what's going on. Sometimes we wish it weren't that way. I mean, we would all rather go much faster, and I'm sure Charles would rather, you know, spend less money, right? It takes more time and money when it takes longer. And there's one other thing that we do sometimes, and that is, there's been quite a number of times where we built something, it's all done, it more or less works, and then we take a hard look at it and we decide we just don't think that's good enough. We want to do that again. And so there's some components we've built 2, 3, times, and you know, we all wish we could have done it right the first time. But again, some of the smartest minds in the world working on this, working really hard, trying really hard, they definitely did not want to build it more than once. And you know, if we then look at it and feel the need, you know, we can take some valid criticism for having to do that on occasion. But I think that the stick-to-itiveness of just, man, we're going to get this right by hook or by crook, and if a piece isn't good enough, then we're going to build it again. That's the commitment to delivering the real product that real works, rather than just a release, a deadline. So we're in a hurry. We care about releases and we care about deadlines, but the thing that matters the most is to deliver a quality product.
Yeah, thank you for that, David. You know, we often compare things to the space program, because Philippe and I are kind of both space fans here. And, you know, the Apollo missions, I think there was like 17 Apollo missions. Apollo 1 didn't land on the moon. Okay, so we kind of get where you're coming from, where you had to build and rebuild things 2, 3, 4 times. You didn't want to do it. You didn't have to, you hope you didn't have to do it. But same thing with any major project. The first time isn't going to be the end product. It's going to take over and over and over again. And I appreciate that background. So that I want to get onto the juicy, meaty stuff that the viewers are really interested in hearing. And that's about the new roadmap coming out. Now, last week, you posted a blog post about the roadmap and upcoming status updates. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah. So, I mean, I mentioned in my post, I find this a really exciting kind of a transition stage. And so for a long time, you know, we started with theory and research, and we've spent a long time kind of putting foundation in place. And there's been a lot of promise, but, you know, we're reaching a stage where the rubber actually gets to meet the road, and we're going to deliver real capabilities. And some of this stuff has never been done in the world before. And so we're excited for that. And so that's part of our desire to release a new roadmap. We wanted to put more details about what the different phases are, how they fit together. And there were some things about the old roadmap that we didn't like. And so as an example, we had feature level % complete indicators. And man, we put an enormous amount of work into those, trying to keep them updated, a lot of time and effort. But the truth is they were still wrong. And so that's really frustrating to us more than anybody, but also to a lot of people outside the company. And so it goes back, you know, I mentioned it again in my blog post. There's a famous and funny, but if you build software, it's a little bit painful too. So the quote that, you know, the first 90% of the code takes 90% of the time, and then the last 90% takes another 90%. And again, I'm not trying to make excuses, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen too often, but it happens to us sometimes. And so what we've decided to do, both internally and externally, is we're orienting our development kind of milestones and planning around live progress demos. And so we've worked through all of the functionality that we're building and asked ourselves, okay, for this piece, what's it connected to, and when could we actually show something working? What would that look like? Even if it's in just a command line interface, but more often we're going to actually see something. And so we demonstrate now. We now have an internal demo roadmap where we're showing components as they become complete. And we feel like this is much more accurate, because to demonstrate something is actually working, that last 10%, it has to be done, really done, all done. And it may not be fully integrated and entirely ready to be released, but it is materially done. That's a status you can count on a little bit more. And so we trust that status a little bit more, and we think that the community would also. And so we were also, when we're thinking through this whole roadmap thing, is how can we do a better job of being more open with community, give the community more status. And so what we thought is, well, if we're doing these internal status demonstrations where we show, whatever's recently completed, why wouldn't we record those and make those available? And so that's what we've decided to do. When we release those, we'll also put together a summary of what's being completed during that time. However, whenever the last one came, you probably wouldn't have it be farther than a couple months, and sometimes it might even be only 3 or 4 weeks that's passed. We'll release things when we have something to release, not just on a time drumbeat, so that we actually have something to say when we talk to you. And when we release those demos, I'll do an AMA where I'll start with a summary of what's been done and then ask any questions that people have. And we'll also release a kind of a summary roll-up document of what's been completed. And so then people will be able to see our developers showing what they finished, and they'll see the real status. They'll know what it really is. And in addition to that, we'll also, we already do weekly statuses. We'll keep doing that. We're going to improve them. We have a new internal version, which we think would be good for external as well. And so we'll expose that. And so we think that that's a better way, a more accurate way. And it would be pretty much on the extreme end of the, openness and transparency spectrum. So that's our plan. And we're going to start putting those out around the end of the month.
That's an awesome plan. I think that's fantastic. I'd love to see demos of the software in progress. That'd be incredible. I think the viewers and the customers out there, well, not customers, but people are going to be really happy with that. That's great, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We think it's the right approach. I'm excited about it. And it's going to be fun to show people what we're working on and what's done. That'll be a fun part of it.
So the next part we were going to talk about was, you mentioned the new roadmap and the new approach to the new roadmap. Do you see any trip hazards or any problems that could come up with this new roadmap approach?
Yeah, I do, to be honest. So it was a hard debate to decide what to do. Really, we've decided to be at the extreme end of the openness spectrum and kind of expose the inner workings of what we're doing. And our choice really ends up being between providing less detail and being criticized for not providing more information, or being more transparent and getting criticized for some of the messiness of the sausage making process, because that's the way it is. We aren't perfect. Nobody's perfect. And if you expose the internals of your development process, then you're going to get to see a whole bunch of the, we make mistakes because we're human. You're going to get to see that. And so we know we're going to get criticized for that. Many people will understand it, but as you've seen, the Twitter sphere and there's quite a bit of hostility out there sometimes. And so we know we're going to be up for some criticism on something, because we're going to be really open. And so I'm actually eager for constructive criticism that I could use to help make things better, but I'm not going to spend any time on flamers and unconstructive stuff. We're just going to ignore them. We need to focus on time on building a platform that solves real problems for real people as fast as we can. And the rest is not really relevant. And so we've made a choice to be extremely transparent and open. And we recognize, like, this is going to be a little bit rough occasions. We're going to get beat up for some stuff, but that's okay. We're going to show you what we're doing, and you guys can think whatever you think of it. We hope you'll appreciate that very few projects show you so much. And so that's what we've decided to do. That aligns with our ethos and our feeling about the way that we should collaborate with the community. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, you know what the next big question is. So it's awesome to get those live demos out there.
Yeah.
Philippe, what's the next biggest question on the people we have on social media? When, what?
When Shelley?
When Shelley?
Yeah, when testnet? When testnet? When Shelley? When staking? When moon? Those are the questions that we get in Telegram.
When Lambo?
Yeah.
I don't know Moon and Lambo. I'm not going near that one.
Let's take it in baby steps. When testnet?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so testnet quite soon, right? So testnet is really the beginning of Shelley, and so testnet's coming early June. I want to be clear about what it is. So we're going to start with kind of a minimal MVP. So that we can put it on the testnet and work on testing different capabilities, right? So around stake pool operation, around delegation, and testing. And once you put those things in place, we want to test on the testnet all the real world attack vectors that we know about. You know, let's have a whole bunch of nodes be malicious. Let's have 49% of them be malicious. Let's have a whole bunch of bad network connections. Let's you know, all the things we know about. Let's change the chain and see if we can get a new one through. And so we'll be working on that, and it will start with a small group of stake pool operators that are willing to kind of work closely with us. And then we're going to be both adding functionality and adding stake pool operators as we go. And so it'll start with a real narrow group and real narrow functionality, and then increase both. And so we'll do a series of rolling releases to the testnet, and that will evolve over 3 or 4 months to be what would be ready for mainnet Shelley, and then once that's tested on testnet, then that goes live on mainnet. And so the question of when is tough. I think that the rest will come by the end of Q4. I don't want to get too wrapped up in dates. I don't want to say nothing either, but we are in a hurry. we're working long hours, but the main thing is that we're hurrying to have something that really meets the needs of that we're trying to meet. And so what we want to provide is the platform for enterprise centralized apps. And to really solve that problem, we don't just want to hurry along to release. Our goal is to solve that problem and release something that does solve that problem. And so that's the goal. The release isn't the goal. Enterprise class decentralized application platform capability, that's the goal. And so we're in a bust butt hurry to deliver that. But we're not going to rush that and do it half-ass. So we think Q4, but we won't just be releasing to hit a date. We're going to hit a capability level and a quality level.
That sounds good. And to go along with what you're just saying, let's say the next step is the MVP, which is the minimum viable product for testnet operators of small core, and that's in June, or what's the nearest date?
Yeah, testnet starting early June, and then evolving towards being complete Shelley, which we think would be Q4, end of Q4, probably have it done. So
okay,
that's the way it looks right now.
All right, that sounds good. And what I'd like to do on that note is put in a plug for the Cardano Stake Pool Best Practices Telegram group. If you want to be one of those stake pool operators who participates in the testnet, you need to get in on that Telegram group. If you post on Facebook, and I'm saying this jokingly, but if you go on Facebook and post, hey, how do I operate a stake pool? You're probably going in the wrong direction. You need to get on that Telegram and practice and learn and understand how the technology works. That way you'll be ready to participate in the testnet and providing inputs that the developers are going to need. Is that a pretty good summary?
Yes, I think so. And I'd like to ask David a follow-up question, because if you go into that Telegram group, there are a lot of diehard Cardano fans, myself included. So how can we help? How can we get involved with the testnet process? Is it going to be some kind of random selection? Is it going to be like we put our we go into operation and you handpick some certain stake pools that are going to be helping you out? What's the process so the
Yeah.
community can help you out as much as possible.
There is a place on the testnet site where you can sign up to indicate you want to. In the very beginning, it's going to be a really small group of handpicked folks that we know have very deep, system admin skills and good systems and all that kind of stuff, because we'll probably do really fast iterations of trying testing stuff. And so those folks are going to need to be high skill and high patience, and we'll work closely with them, and it'll be a small group. And then we'll add more and more. And, at the end, we'd like to have a large number of stake pools operating on that testnet. So people can go there and sign up, indicate their interest, and then do that. And then after that, when it's on mainnet, anyone can run a stake pool. So that's decentralized and will be open to the public and anyone capable of doing it.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And you know what, the next phase after the test net is out, and then Shelley's going to complete, and we're looking at maybe Q4 from Shelley based on what you were telling us earlier. Then what comes after Shelley? We got Goguen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Shelley is decentralization, right? And so right now we're running on federated nodes operated by IOHK and partners. And so we need to, move towards decentralization, so we're not controlling the network. It's worthwhile talking a little bit about how that'll happen. So we won't just throw a switch and all of a sudden we'll be running on 1,000 nodes that we don't know anything about, right? So there's a parameter we can set, which is like a setting of how we walk down the path towards decentralization, and that controls the proportion of nodes we're controlling in relation to the proportion that are just in the public. And obviously we want that eventually to be 100%. And so, however, you don't know what's going to happen as you start to see how the network is operating as we go down that path. And there's always a possibility we'd see something we don't like in the way it's operating, in the way that an attack vector we didn't see. And so then we could back it up, release a fix, and then continue forward from there. So we have ability to control that, which we feel like is the right way to do it safely. And then Goguen is smart contracts. And so that's actually really exciting, because if you think about it, even Shelley is foundational, right? It's really important. It's actually a big deal. So if you think about proof of stake, completely decentralized with stake pools and delegation, that's brand new. That's never been done. And that's very meaningful, because that's proof of stake in a decentralized manner and performant enough to operate, enterprise class applications on it. And so that's brand new, and that will be that's something we're really excited about. But at that point, you still can't build applications on it. There's no smart contracts yet. And so that's where Goguen comes in. Goguen is smart contracts. And so what's interesting is that effort's been running in parallel. It's not like we're going to finish Shelley and then catch our breath and then start Goguen. It's been running in parallel for years, which again, in the same manner, it started with research and then it went into prototyping, and then we've been implementing and working on that. And the outcome's really exciting. And so we have ProleteR, which is our smart contracts language, which is embedded within Haskell, which is a language which is very helpful to programmers in being able to validate what they've written does what they think it does, which has been a real issue in smart contracts on other platforms. Not to throw any shade on those, I often say, we stand on the shoulders of giants in this industry, and folks that built earlier smart contract platforms, they are the giants and they are the shoulders we stand on. But I think we all want it to move to the next level. And so lots of us are focused on that. And we're really excited about what's coming. It's quite close to done. The real issue is to get Shelley far enough along so that we'll be ready to implement Goguen and the smart contracts and ProleteR into Cardano. And so in addition to having a ProleteR as a smart contracts language, we've also been at work on a domain-specific language for financial contracts. And so this is Marlowe. And this is not a Turing-complete language where you can build any logic. It's very specific for financial contracts, because those are the ones that are going to be most prominent within Cardano. And it's really nice because it's focused to allow a programmer who's not as technical, but who might be a domain expert. So let's assume it's an application in the assurance industry. There's going to be an industry analyst who's an expert in those kinds of contracts. And ideally want that person to be as close to the coalface of development as you could get. And so that's what Marlowe enables. They would be able to, without a lot of technical development background, build smart contracts using that language. And there's even an easy to use development platform that you can use, which is called Meadow, which has the sort of raw, close to the metal Haskell and Plutus on one side, and then it has an easy to use interface on the other side, which kind of in a WYSIWYG or a AdLib sort of a way lets you fill in the gaps to design your smart contracts. And however, that's still implemented within Plutus and within Haskell. So this is still a very enterprise class approach. This is still the language that banks use when they're looking to program something that they know is going to flow billions of dollars through it, and they have to make sure it gets right. Because that's our assumption, that the Cardano network is going to be the foundation for many billions of dollars of transaction. And so we need to provide a platform that gets it right, and we need to provide the people who will build applications on top of it tools and means to make sure that they get right too. So that's what's coming in Goguen, and actually, because it's quite far along, I think it's going to be roughly a quarter after Shelley.
That's fantastic to hear. We recently had an Ethereum developer who looked at Plutus, and he's quite impressed with it, and that's Forrest from Hashoshi Crypto YouTube, and he's planning to come back. We'll have him come back on. So as he looks more at the product, it's kind of like getting his look at the product is like getting an expert set of eyes. It's the most expert set of eyes you can get, and his evaluation will be great in that respect.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, we're excited about it. I was talking to a blockchain developer not so long ago, and he was really frustrated. He did quite a lot of development on both Ethereum and EOS, and he had gotten really frustrated with Solidity. He kept telling me, he kept going on that, it takes me 40 lines of code to concatenate a number on the end of the string. And that's actually a pretty common thing to do. If you're looking at a website and it says room number 104, that's a number on the end of a string. If it says a dollar value and then has the amount after it, that's those two things combined, and that's usually one line of code or half a line of code. And to need 40 lines of code, that's pretty painful. And it's especially painful when you realize that every one of those 40 lines of code is a place you might have a bug. Every line of code you could have made a mistake in. So we want to provide powerful tools which they're efficient, but also help programmers get it right. And we're also excited. We have this first domain-specific language, which is Marlowe for financial contracts, but we've architected it so that it's easy to add domain-specific languages. So just think of the domains that we might solve problems in with blockchain. People have had a lot of discussion about, say, certificates, like university degrees, birth certificates, property registry, all manner of certificates. So there can be a domain-specific programming language, which is just the core of what you need to build applications around certificates, that has therefore examples and implementation models and design patterns that you can use, so that when you're building an application in that domain, you have help. You've been helped along the path. So not only can you build it faster, but the pieces that you were able to reuse because they already existed, well, they've already been tested, and that's another place where you probably aren't going to have bugs. And so there could be lots of domain-specific languages. There could be supply chain management. There could be identity. Every category of application that you hear about as a good application for blockchain could have its own language. And we think there's going to be a lot. And not only will we build them, but we think that many third parties will too. Because if you're a third-party decentralized application builder and you decide, we have a lot of expertise. We've built, 4, 5, 6, 10 supply chain management solutions now for different clients. Let's implement that domain-specific language for supply chain. Well, now you're the company that built that. And you're going to be, you're definitely going to be considered if you're trying to win those kind of projects, because you're the company that built the domain-specific language, and easy to add it into Cardano and utilize it there. So we think there'll be a flourishing ecosystem of those, and that's going to be a really nice environment for developers. And then along with that, it goes to how the development process happens. So in other platforms, you might use one code base for the code that goes on the server. You might use one code base for the code that goes on the blockchain, and you might use another one for the code that is in the front end. It's running on the browser. And so at the very least, you have two code bases, and often you have three. And that's another place where you can have bugs in the handoff between that code. It's also just challenging. You need a wide skill set to apply there. And so in our case, you're building in Plutus and Haskell and Marlowe, which are all essentially the same language and feel the same with the same tool set. And you can build on the blockchain, on the server side, and on the front end, all using similar code base and same tool set. And so we think that's going to go a long way towards helping developers deliver results efficiently and at high quality and with fewer bugs.
I would like to ask a follow-up question. So I'm a little bit confused. So when you're building domain-specific languages using Marlowe, would it look like a Meadow-like tool? Would it be, it would just be specific to whatever use case that you design for your company? Or how? Okay.
So think of the Marlowe is one of those languages, and Meadow is the tool it operates in. And so you could imagine maybe multiple domain-specific languages potentially within Meadow, or you can imagine a very similar but different tool for each of the domain-specific languages if that's what was needed. And we've architected it so it's easy to add them. And so the point is to abstract out the things that would be specific to, like Meadow is a good example. Plutus is what they call Turing complete, which is any logic that you can express, you could build in Plutus, whatever logic, whatever functionality you might choose to build. Whereas Marlowe is specific. You can't build anything in Marlowe because it's lacking. It's been purposefully simplified. All the extra stuff has been taken out. It's not Turing complete. You can't build any logic. It's only meant to implement the specific logical elements around financial contracts. And so that makes it much simpler. It's limited, but it's much simpler, and it lets someone who has expertise in financial contracts work specifically with that. It's a lot less to learn and much simpler. And then a more experienced developer would be able to tie those components together into the overall application using Plutus and Haskell. Did that make sense? Did that answer your question?
Yes. So they would have to use features of Plutus and combine them, because Marlowe is kind of stripped completely.
That's right.
And it's just for that one specific. So it would kind of be like a derivation of it, but it would have the features specific for whatever application you're building.
That's right. Let's imagine an application. An example would be helpful. So let's dream up. Let's use the example of supply chain. So, so in agriculture, say, a bunch of small hold where there's both production and there's various processing of this agricultural product, and we're tracking it through the system and trying to validate its origin and things like that. So now that might also include financial transactions. If you're moving product through the system, then there might be financial transactions. So those financial transactions would use Marlowe. And there might also be other functionality which is more specific to supply chain. And so let's imagine a world that someone had written, us or someone else had written supply chain DSL, and so we probably would give it some crazy arcane name like we always do in IOHK, and so then those components would be written in that language, and then the total of those components would be tied together using Plutus as Cardano's smart contract language, and the application even broader than that. For the pieces that aren't on the blockchain, you might use Haskell, because that's not even specific to blockchain. That's just a general purpose, very powerful development language that you could use for other components which aren't on the blockchain, on the server side and on the front end. Does that make sense? A kind of a rough picture of how it might fit together?
Yes, it does. It does. I have a quick follow-up question. So IOHK's role in this, are they going to be building, is it siloed to IOHK as of now to create those domain-specific languages, or is IOHK going to open it up to the broader business community to build, like, for example, supply chain management, or putting birth certificates or land registry or whatever documentation that you want on the blockchain?
Yeah. IOHK is primarily, in terms of Cardano, we're primarily focused on, delivering the platform of Cardano. So, that it has the true capability to be, we want it to be the world's best, decentralized application platform for enterprise class blockchain applications. And so that's our primary focus. But so then you might ask, okay, so David, if you deliver me that product, how do I know anyone's ever going to use it? In addition to a product strategy, in addition to the strategy which delivers a product that we think will meet the right needs, we need a marketing strategy and a market penetration strategy to get it into the hands of developers and organizations that would use it. And so the gold standard for driving adoption for application development platforms are live reference, real implementations of live applications that are solving real problems at large scale for real people, right? You can do little piddly proof of concepts, but if you solve problems for millions of people and it's working at scale, that's for real. And so we understand that at IOHK, and those efforts also help us to know exactly what the product needs to do. So there's a nice overlap there. So, IOHK doesn't want to run off and become a professional services organization, but it certainly makes sense to do some professional services projects so that we can have live real implementations out there solving real problems. And you guys have heard of, Charles announcing of various projects. They're really exciting. These aren't, just proof of concepts. These are solving real world problems for potentially millions of people in some cases. And so that's a strategy for demonstrating the capabilities of the platform. And the reason that it makes sense to do them in the locations where Charles has done it, and he's mentioned this before, is that in those developing countries, there's not a lot of pre-existing systems that you would need to displace. If you tried to do a property registry system in Chicago, you'd have to talk for years about how you would transition from the old one, and there would be incumbent system providers that would be fighting you, and that would take a long time. There would be regulations involved, and also you might have a lot of competition for the creation of that system. Whereas if in developing countries, there's a lot of real world problems that need urgent solving, there are no existing systems available for those problems. There's no systems that we have to displace. There's less competition for the provision of those solutions, and the governments are eager to solve those problems. And so there usually isn't a lot of government regulation we'd have to push through, but where there is, we would often be working with the government ministers that might have influence on those regulations. And so we can work with them to make the regulation make sense. We're not, by the way, at all anti-regulation. We're just, in favor of regulation that makes sense. That's part of growing the adoption of blockchain, is to just get the right regulation in place. So those projects, those implementations, deliver us real world reference implementations on top of our products, which demonstrate to other organizations the capability of the product and give them the confidence that they can build their own applications on it. That makes sense?
Yes, that's fascinating. I just had like an aha moment, and thanks for clarifying things. And every now and then, I look at the project all the time, and things are just, what you just said just really resonated and it clicked. I see the picture of what you guys are trying to do, and it's really fascinating. Brick, were you about to say something?
Yes, with all those awesome things that David just described, I was thinking something for our viewers, because on this podcast, we break things down into easy to understand concepts, but something for our viewers to understand would be what David's describing here is IOHK builds multiple products for multiple stakeholders, not specifically customers, but stakeholders. So IOHK develops development tools for developers. And right now, cryptocurrency is very developer centric. And it's cryptocurrency is migrating out towards being user centric, but it's not entirely there yet. So IOHK builds these products for developers, and for the average everyday users like you and I, they build a wallet, and the wallet is for a different group of stakeholders. So I kind of put the stakeholders in different groups. You got the developers who need certain tools to build these applications David was just talking about. And you have wallets for the everyday users to conduct transactions with. And then those wallets get greater and greater capabilities as time goes on, so that they can interact with other things like the Tangent card and the Visa system and MasterCard and stuff like that. So I just wanted to kind of clarify and summarize there for the viewers who are just tuning in and just now starting to get into cryptocurrency. We got to kind of simplify that stuff just a little bit so that it works out. Because I do have a family member who watches our podcast and checked in on once in a while and said, I don't understand what you guys are talking about.
It's worthwhile. And it's also useful to differentiate a platform and how the value of a cryptocurrency that underlies a development platform is different than just a currency which is intended to be money. So if you were to think of Litecoin, or initially Bitcoin itself, or Monero, these are cryptocurrencies which were built to be a digital money. And Bitcoin has ended up, because the transaction fees have become expensive and it's become a little slow, so it's ended up at the moment less money and more a store of value. It's like digital gold is the example people are using, and it may through development end up becoming money again. But at the moment that Bitcoin is being primarily used as a store of value, like keeping gold under your mattress, but in a safer way. And there are other cryptocurrencies which are intended to be money, but it is true that something like Monero or Litecoin, they are a form of money, their currency, and so is ADA, the currency which is underlying Cardano. But what drives their value is fundamentally different. What drives the value of a currency is adoption of the currency. So what you would need is, it's the same thing, like when the world needs more dollars to buy things which people only will take dollars for. If you want to buy oil, most of the time these days, you need to pay for it in dollars, which means a country has to go and buy dollars in order to pay for the oil they would want to buy. Not always true, but true most of the time. And so that increases the value of the dollar because there's demand for people to use it. So what would increase the demand for people to use Cardano, which is the important question to ask? Well, when you utilize the Cardano platform, all these smart contracts and all this functionality we were talking about building on top of Cardano, well, all those transactions require a little bit of a fee for those transactions to run. And it's small, but it adds up. And so you need ADA, the currency that's underneath Cardano. You need ADA in order to use the platform. And so people building applications on top of Cardano and the active use of those applications, that's what would drive the value of Cardano. Now, the other thing that would drive it, of course, is if people believe that we are going to produce the world's best development platform, and they would buy ahead of time on the belief that that's going to happen. But fundamentally, if we don't deliver that, sooner or later that goes away. We have to deliver the capability. And this is why we don't focus on any kind of pump and dump and let's tell everyone that they should go buy ADA. And no, we're focused on building a platform that large organizations will want to build their applications on, because if people build their applications on top of Cardano, then ADA will be enormously valuable. We do have an amazing marketing team. We will do a lot of great marketing, but the best marketing we could possibly do is to release an awesome product that makes it easier to build quality applications on, so that when a large company, let's assume, an airplane manufacturer wants to put their entire parts supply chain on the blockchain. What if a package shipper like FedEx wanted to increase efficiency and eliminate single points of failure by putting a package tracking system on blockchain? This would be utterly central to their business. They would have to completely trust that platform. It would cost many millions of dollars to build that and probably take years to roll out into the organization. The total spend would be billions. And so they would need to trust that platform is going to serve their needs. It's going to really work. It's going to really perform. And so, that's what we need to provide. And when people build those kinds of applications on Cardano, then ADA becomes more and more valuable, because all those transactions require a little bit of ADA.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out with the applications being built on the platforms, because I ran a Twitter poll. Now, a lot of my Twitter tends to lean Cardano, but I ran a Twitter poll and 78% of people do not use dApps at all. 21% use Ethereum. And there was a small percentage, they use dApps on Ethereum, and there was a small percentage use dApps on EOS. There are a lot of dApps available on EOS, but they're more along the lines of games and gambling and stuff like that. But the type of applications you're talking about, we say dApps, they're applications that interface with blockchain in some way. And the type of applications you're talking about have much greater consequences and a much greater impact, therefore require a much higher degree of assurance. So
that's right. And there are some large companies that are kind of starting to bite the bullet to build some of these applications, but most of them are in wait and see mode. And again, this isn't intended to be any criticism of existing companies. It's just that's where we are now as an industry. In the beginning of the internet didn't work very well as far as a development platform. It was kind of a giant mess. It didn't work. And eventually it was made to work, and we built a lot of stuff on it. And now much of our life runs on the internet, and blockchain is in a similar place where it's beginning to make the transition from an exciting technology that has a lot of promise into one that you can build, real stuff on, that you can run real businesses and organizations on. And so that's where we are. The existing platforms would be the first to say, like, well, you can't build an enterprise class platform on something that has 7 or 15 transactions per second limit, right? That just won't work. If you think about, say, Visa charge card network, where a lot of us use it every day, you're looking at maybe an average of thousands of transactions a second, and peak at maybe 50,000 transactions a second. If you think about the like button on Facebook, you're talking about an average of roughly 30,000 transactions a second. So some people have said, wouldn't it be great if you could put a social network on blockchain so that no one could control it, and I could own my own data, and no one could try and manipulate me by knowing who I'm friends with unless I actually allow them to see that data. And that would be great, but we've got work to do, because we need to support an average of 30,000 transactions a second. Then we're a ways away. But I think we would all be really excited about applications where we could control the information around our identity and our social interactions. And so I think we'll get there. The next step is to add these capabilities that provide platforms you can build real things on. There are companies building what you could say real applications, but those companies in an honest moment would say, yeah, we totally get it. The platforms we're built on right now, they're not as performant as we'll need them to be to achieve the vision we have for our business. But we decided to go ahead and build anyway, because we wanted to get ahead of the curve and be ready when the technology got there. We'd already have the rest of it. And so maybe the existing platforms evolve to meet it, or maybe new platforms like Cardano meet that need. And so David, then those applications will run on those systems which can actually support the real need.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that. That's why I love doing these podcasts. I learned so much from you guys. And you just identified a perfectly real use case, 30,000 transactions per second to get 30,000 likes per second. Those are real metrics that you can actually use as a target to say, if we need how many transactions per second, because we hear a lot about that in the Telegram groups and on social media is, oh, how many transactions per second your blockchain do? But now you're starting to identify specifically, how much do you need? And it's a lot. Yeah, it really is. So, I mean, by bringing those up, that sets the bar pretty high. So, those two applications, we're not going to replace those in the next year on blockchain, most likely. But there's a lot of things we can do with the level of performance it looks like we'll be at in the near future. Yeah, and David, there's one other thing I was wondering, and then I'm going to hand it over to Philippe, and that is, have you ever heard, this might sound kind of trivial, but have you ever heard anyone talking about using blockchain currencies for in-game currencies? For example, World of Warcraft, League of Legends, Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, stuff like that, because at one point, one of those major video games, it was either World of Warcraft or League of Legends, their in-game currency actually became worth more money than the currency of the country of Venezuela. And I'm wondering if you've ever heard in your circles about people saying, yeah, you could probably use blockchain type currencies as an in-game currency. Because I know in the year 2018, I spent over $120, not counting the game itself, in in-game currencies on Elder Scrolls. Don't tell my wife that.
Well, so absolutely. And so the currency you bought, probably the in-game currency, it probably wasn't a cryptocurrency. And so you were okay with that. That's what was available. But here's why you might have wanted it to be, and here's why that game might have wanted it to be. You had to trust that game and the people who operate it completely. You had to trust that their servers wouldn't be compromised, and you had to trust that they wouldn't flood that game with 10 times more currency, making your currency immediately worth 10 times less. And you even had to trust them to maintain the database, because if you show up at that game and you had 100 units of that, and it says 10, well, hey, wait a minute. No, I had 100. No, our records say 10. No, really, I had 100. Well, can you prove it? Well, no, but I did. I mean, what are you going to do? And so a cryptocurrency is validatable, often public, although it doesn't always have to be, and immutable and trackable, and something that, you would be able to know literally what the economic policy is for that currency. And so this is relevant not only for in-game digital currencies, but there are digital assets, and some of them are starting to become very, very valuable. One-of-a-kind digital images, assets, game characters. Some games, as you know better than I, the character you're using is accumulating powers and history and tools, and you would then be able to potentially sell that character or sell some of the tools that you've accumulated. And so those are digital assets. Again, right now, you're basically trusting somebody's central database. And it would make more sense in the long term for that game to either use a public blockchain or have their own blockchain implementation, so that currency is tracked and managed in a way that they can't, that no hacker can mess up, and that company can't mess up either accidentally or on purpose, which would give you confidence in it. It might mean that you would be willing to say to your wife, actually, honey, I'm not going to buy just 120. I'm going to buy $1,000 of that, because it's going up, and here's an article where this technical person read the open source code for this entire blockchain behind this game, and he validated it, like, this thing is airtight, it's secure. So I think it makes sense. I'm going to buy $1,000 of this, and I'm going to buy whatever things I can buy in that game. And because I can validate and I can know for sure that no one can take that away from me or dilute it inappropriately, then I can have confidence that it might go up. And digital assets are going to be a big deal in the future. At some point way back when, if you were to tell early human society, hey, we're going to make some images on a piece of paper, and that's going to be worth a lot of money someday, they might have laughed at you. But we've seen $100+ million sales for paintings and other forms of art, and single instance, verifiably non-copyable digital assets are going to be a big deal in the future. It's just beginning to be a part of our culture in some areas, but it's likely coming. And blockchain is the natural environment for those things to run on.
Thank you for your insight.
That was incredible. Incredible answer. I'm enjoying this. So I want to move over to one last question before we move over to the Reddit questions, because we're towards the latter half of this episode. So last time you were on the Cardano Effect, I believe it was episode 20, we were talking about the upcoming update, or the update on the fork. So can you tell us exactly, or not the exact date, but where are we in that whole map process that Duncan was showing up on the screen?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up again. So we're ready for it. We're a little worried. We have a bunch of exchanges which carry Cardano, and a lot of them are just wonderful, and we're in frequent communication with them. just to make sure everything's going great. And some of them are smaller and harder to be in contact with. And we're at the moment, we're not entirely confident that all of them have updated. So we're a little worried about throwing the switch and then having some people not being able to, to move their ADA around. So we've been trying to contact those ones for a while. Actually, that podcast that I was on was one of our early efforts to do that. It looks like, maybe we'll be, doing some more aggressive outreach. But so that's where we are. And I don't want to promise a date because that date's influenced by people we can't influence it directly, at least.
Is there any way the community can help for those smaller exchanges if we can push them to move their ADA off the exchange so they can make that switch, if they're not going to?
We might do that. I mean, we're happy when an exchange carries ADA. We want to be good partners. So throwing them in front of the bus is something that we sort of culturally would not like to do. We like to be nice to our partners, but we might, start to try to message people, gently and a little bit more stridently, a little bit more loudly in public channels if we have to. That might be after maybe reaching through executive channels first privately. So we'll do what we have to. We'll make sure that at least the majority, so that not too many people are affected. We have numbers on exactly what the volume is across all the exchanges. And so we would be able to use those metrics to know when we're at a point where not too many people could be affected.
Okay, I understand. All right, that's good to know. And if everyone's watching this and you have your ADA on a small exchange and you just kind of forgot about it, you should be using Daedalus or Yoroi. Move it off the exchange, especially if you're a long-term hodler. We need to move forward with this process, and you shouldn't be keeping your ADA on an exchange anyway. Things happen.
True.
So
that's true.
Yeah.
Rick, you wanted to add something?
Oh, well, no, David is right. We got to be good ambassadors to these exchanges, but exchanges help us out here. Okay, guys?
Yeah. Right. We know what it's like. You're trying to contact customer service. They don't contact you back. So there's only so long that could happen. So I'm sure that the Cardano team and the IOHK team has been reaching out. So so let's move over to the Reddit questions and see if we can do there's quite a few, so maybe we can do kind of like a rapid fire and wrap up the podcast, if that's okay with you, David.
Sure, whatever you guys.
Let's see if we can do 20 questions in under 20 minutes. How's that sound? High speed, rapid, continuous. Okay. The first one, we got this first one from Heineken 007 because it rolls in perfect. All right, so David, there's two things that the viewers have been very interested in, and that is, how much is IOHK involved with Attala, and how does that affect their Cardano? So the first question is on Polymath. So Attala and Polymath both fall in the same categories. And this question is from one of our great question askers, Heineken 007. Thank you, Heineken 007. Is the Polymath collaboration with IOHK strictly an IOHK Polymath partnership, or is Cardano involved, as in the Cardano Foundation or Cardano in general?
So the partnership with Polymath is actually strictly Charles Hoskinson relationship. It's just him. He's been around for a long time, and he has enormous knowledge, and companies value, his advice. And so that's what's going on there. Charles is collaborating with them a little bit. I actually like it that it's happening. Token offerings are a big deal coming up. I would like us within IOHK and Cardano to have deep knowledge about them. So I'm glad he's doing that. And there's the potential that the companies, could collaborate so that Cardano would be interoperable and could collaborate well with token offerings from Polymath and potentially other tokenizing companies. And so the people are aware what the company is. Polymath is there are a lot of assets, real estate, stocks, other traditional assets, which people are thinking will be tokenized on blockchains. And that's an easier way to trade that value than it is now. As an example, right now, the only way to buy and sell a house is to buy and sell the whole thing, whereas it should be possible to tokenize that and have people buy little pieces of it. And so they're one of the best companies in the space, I think. So it's good he has a relationship with them. It doesn't affect us at all. I didn't even know till we heard about it in the news. So it's not an IOHK or Cardano focused thing. There's no ongoing, a team-to-team collaboration, but I think he's great he's doing it. You also mentioned Attala. So Attala is one of the other products which IOHK has built. At the moment, there is Cardano and there is Attala. There's no overlap of teams. There's never been overlap of teams. The only overlap that there has been is that we on Cardano, we stole their technical lead, who's Bruno, and he's wonderful, and we liked him, and so he's working more with us now. So sorry, Attala. So they're not slowing us down, but Attala is actually really, really good for Cardano and vice versa. So first let's talk about what that is. Attala is a blockchain platform that is not necessarily fully decentralized and is not necessarily public. So what if you were a consortium of banks? There's just 10 of you. Let's assume you're 10 banks in the Southern California area, and you decide you'd like to make it easier to just pass funds around between you. Doesn't matter why you've decided that. And so you'd like to use blockchain because it's going to be faster and more verifiable and more secure and cheaper. And so, well, do you really need a public blockchain like Cardano? You probably don't. All of the nodes that would be participating in that network are probably nodes operated by the partners that are invited into that consortium. You know those nodes. So you could operate a private network where only invited organizations who are joining your consortium are operating networks. And that allows a number of things. It allows you may not need the same degree of consensus that a public blockchain would need. So therefore, you could give up a little bit on 51% consensus, and you might get some more performance. You could keep all of the network communication entirely private and behind VPNs and other secure means. So you could operate that one sort of in secret behind closed doors because you don't need it in public. There are other, however, applications where it makes very sense to have it on a public, fully decentralized blockchain, which is what Cardano is. And so if something needs to be in the public domain so that it's validatable, so that everyone can look at it and know that it's accurate, then it should be on a public blockchain. And a public blockchain definitely needs the full consensus so that nobody can tamper with it. Because a private blockchain, you know all the parties. And if someone tampers with it, you're going to say, you violated your contract. A day later, they're kicked out of the network and they're gone. Well, in a public blockchain, you might not even know who many of the node operators are, and you need to assure that the system motivates them to behave appropriately or stops them from compromising the chain if they have malicious behavior. So as it turns out, let's talk about then how it fits together. There are many applications where you might want some of the functionality on a private blockchain and some of it on a public blockchain. And so it's really nice that we have Attala, because those two systems can then easily interoperate. And most likely in time, they'll even be able to have applications developed on them using the same smart contract language. And so it's a really natural thing. Attala is right now, there are various projects beginning, which would be natural for a private blockchain, sort of more consortium based, and those go naturally on Attala. But then it seems to happen frequently that as they go through the details of designing that functionality, it occurs, oh, well, actually, we should write this portion of that data to a public blockchain. So why don't we write this portion of the data to Cardano and the rest of it might be on Attala? And sometimes the opposite happens. And so this is not unusual when you think about analogous existing systems in the world. If you think about any major system, even just an e-commerce system for a medium-sized company, or any large application that exists in the world, government systems, DMV, registry, any complex internet and mobile application system, it's probable that some portions of that data are written onto different systems and databases. So as an example, if you were going to go buy something from an e-commerce vendor, well, that's an e-commerce site which is gonna write the order information to a database that focuses on that. It's pretty likely that that order information, however, would get written across to an inventory management and a supply chain management system so they could actually ship that order. So that's a different system with a different database. That financial transaction would also need to get written over into their accounting package so that this company's accounting systems can track the money, right? And there might be others. So in the blockchain world, similarly, there are different kinds of components which would be better living on either a public blockchain or a private blockchain. And so we're not the only ones approaching it this way. There's Ethereum Enterprise, and you've also probably heard of Hyperledger. You would have heard of R3 Corda. These are non-public blockchain applications that companies can adopt when they want to build blockchain functionality, and they don't have a need for a fully decentralized and public blockchain. And if you don't need a fully decentralized and public blockchain, there's some advantages to keeping it private. So it can make sense to do that. And so right now, however, it's challenging for companies to develop those sorts of applications because you might end up in a scenario where, yeah, okay, this portion of the functionality, that's going to live on Hyperledger, but this other portion is going to live on Ethereum, and there could be another. And those are entirely different development platforms. They use different languages. They use different approaches. They use different tool sets. Now that's done and that happens, but that's challenging, and that's more likely to have bugs and more likely to take longer and be less efficient in building. And so we're pretty excited about having the sort of IOHK product family include both Cardano and Attala. They go really perfectly together. Attala doesn't cost Cardano anything, but it does provide sort of a source of potential platform users that might come our way through Attala. And truth be told, there'll be a fair amount that flow the other way too, where companies have adopted Cardano as the best public blockchain for their needs, and a portion of their application might make more sense on the private blockchain. So they would then utilize Attala. And having those fit together and having them be a natural place to build hybrid applications that need both, well, that's pretty amazing. That's a pretty unique, they use the phrase unique selling proposition, a unique feature of both products. What other blockchain platform has a family of platforms where you can implement both functionality that would go on a public or private blockchain and have that go naturally together? Both of the platforms are really great on their own. Both of them are groundbreaking and solving problems that nobody else is solving. Together, that's kind of extraordinary that you'd have them together. It's a lot of foresight on the part of the company to do it. So some people have been worried, hey guys, come on, keep your eye on the ball with Cardano. Don't get distracted by Attala. But there are different teams, it's separate, and having the two together drives adoption of both. So it's a really smart overall kind of company product strategy. So that's kind of the background of those two.
Yeah, that's a totally fantastic answer. That was a massive amount of information. And Amazon and Microsoft are some of the few companies, and IBM, that are starting to get in blockchain. And with all that information you just put out, I kind of hope they watch this podcast, but at the same time, I'm kind of hoping they don't, and they just buy Cardano instead. But that was awesome information. Absolutely incredible. Philippe, would you like to take the next one, please?
Yes, the next question is from Marcada19, and basically, to sum up the question quickly, asking about Cardano's 2020 vision, whether you're going to go the STO route, you're focusing on STOs, or you're focusing on projects for developing countries, and that could be banking projects and whatnot. So what is Cardano's direction as far as that?
Sure. So I mean, it's actually related to the last one, right? The Polymath and companies like Polymath are focused on token offerings, and there's actually a number of those companies. There's a fair amount of competition in that space. Where there is almost no competition right now is for a platform that can provide true enterprise class decentralized application platform capability. And so that's what we're focused on offering. That doesn't exist in the world, and that's what's really, really needed. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't in the long term have some tokenization capability. We know we'll have multi-currency capability, and you would be able to create a new currency on Cardano just like you can on Ethereum, and do a variety of things with that. So, but that's not our focus right now, because there's a lot of competition in it, and there's other people doing that well, whereas what we're aimed at, no one's doing well. But it's interesting. So what the user mentioned is that, well, it might, be a long time before developing countries are going to do anything, with blockchain. And the truth is that's not really true. It's going to take 20, 30 years before blockchain, is as prevalent as, say, the internet is today. But people are starting to implement those applications right now. And some of the governments and other organizations within developing countries, they're talking to us right now about building applications on top of Cardano and Attala. And so those needs exist right now. When a country does not have a land registry system, they really need one. What happens? The land registry system currently exists. Someone walks up and says, who owns this piece of property? And someone walks out of the house and they say, it belongs to me. And here's where the property lines are, because that's where my family always said they were. That in many countries, that's the only thing that exists. Like, that's not really practical. And so they need systems like that. They need supply chain management systems. They need, in some cases, Charles has mentioned the potential currency for Addis Ababa, the city. In that city, 6 million people pay their water and power bills by going to an office and standing in line for a long, long time every month. So half a day a month to pay their power and water bills. And if they don't pay it, then it gets shut off. How'd you guys like to spend half a day every month paying your water and power bill? So what if there was a cryptocurrency that just let them do that? And what if they were required to use that? So the kind of functionality for applications built on top of an enterprise class platform, like the need is right now. And it's not just that we're focused on third world. The advantage of third world is that you can make progress very quickly, because there are urgent needs, there's very minimal competition, and there's no government regulation in your way. So if there is a need and an organization willing to collaborate with you on it, then you can build that thing more or less right away with nothing in your way, with very little friction. And then that gets you reference implementations, which allow you to say, see, 6 million people using it for this function. So, city of Chicago, if you needed to do something, that could work for you too. You try and start in the city of Chicago, it's going to take you a long, long time. So the approach of working in developing countries is not because we're just building the product for developing countries. The product is built to be an enterprise class DApp development platform. But the market penetration strategy is brilliant that Charles is pursuing, because he's going where he can make rapid progress immediately, and therefore get market penetration, get reference implementations on our platforms. And that will demonstrate to the whole world that they can use it for true mission critical enterprise level applications. So that's the difference between product strategy and market penetration strategy.
Fascinating. And I think it's a good use case of what you're going after. And the thing that you said about developing countries, it's very true. These problems exist, and government regulation is not necessarily all the way there. And these land registry is a huge problem. There's in third world countries, it's a massive problem. I'm a Haitian American, and my family on one side owns a small piece of land, nothing substantial, but there's another person in the family that strong-armed the land from everyone else, and he's dangerous. I don't know what kind of mafia connections he has, but no one questions him, because first of all, you can't do anything because of the danger of that particular individual, plus the actual parcel. Exactly. So it's just about who has more.
You might just be able to pay the right person to disagree with you, even if there were records, right?
Exactly. So in this case, it's just who has the strongest arms and who has the most influence that gets the land.
And these countries are looking to do the same thing. Their recent experience with phone technology is on their mind. So they didn't, put all the landlines in place before they had mobile phones. They just went straight to mobile phones. And so that leapfrogging worked really well. And they're looking for the same thing in their financial and other applications, the infrastructure that they can, run their country and their businesses on. Why not just leapfrog straight to digital certificate-based diplomas and property registries and marriage licenses and all of that stuff. Why not go straight there? And that makes a lot of sense to them, and so they're eager to do that. They need these systems, and they're saying, well, I can go and I can put a very expensive older system in place, or I can build one that makes a lot more sense for the future. And so they want to do that, and they're eager to do that fast.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And yes, I agree. Rick, do you want to move on to the next question?
All right. Thank you, David. And thank you, Philippe. Our next question comes from Blockwriter. And a synopsis of his question is, are we more likely to see a greater number of STOs or security token offerings launched on Cardano as opposed to ICOs?
Oh, that's a really good question. The answer is I don't really know. The laws around ICOs and whether or not people can do them, they're in flux right now. And people have been staying away from ICOs because of the legal issues, especially in the US. What they've been doing more recently, if they're doing ICO-like releases, is they're basically not letting small investors in. They're basically treating it like a security offering, and in order to sell a security, you have to only sell it to accredited investors. And I don't remember the exact rules, but I think an accredited investor is supposed to have $1 or $2 million of liquid investor capital. So, let's just make sure that the people who already have the money are the only ones who can make more. It's pretty much the outcome of that. And so that's kind of where the situation is. I don't really, I don't know exactly what's going to happen with ICOs and STOs. Depends a lot on geography and jurisdiction. That's one of the areas of regulation that the industry has to figure out over the next few years.
Okay, thank you. That's great. A lot of times the answer is I don't know, and that is the correct answer we got to live with. And it's almost funny. Sometimes it's like you got to have a license to waste other people's money. So, okay, you're licensed to waste people's money. Great.
Right.
All right, Philippe, go ahead and take the next one.
Okay, next one is from Genzod7. So thank you, Genzod. So the first question, you can answer this if you want. Have you had to put your hands on anyone since taking the position, or have you wanted to?
No. I mean, it's a really you wonder what the team's going to be like when you join. It's a really remarkable group. The people are really, really nice. It's like a high conscientious team. Everyone is sort of really like, how can I help you? What can I do? And wicked whip smart people, not wicked and whip, but wicked smart is what I was trying to say. And really nice. It's been a pleasure to work with the team. And so your next question might be, well, shoot, you guys have had struggles over the years with some milestones and timelines. And so if it's not the team, and what is it? And I've wrestled with that. And my conclusion has been, is it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, is that challenge of making the jump between the formal research portion into real functionality. And that's just been rough. And so we're trying to fix that portion of the process with more of the product function, frankly. It has to do with more discussion and writing down of what it is that we're going to build and how we're going to phase it out. And that allows us, it forces good discussions and decisions around, okay, how complex a form of this capability do we want right off the bat? Should we go with the more complex one right away? Should we add more later? And that allows you to hit development milestones with quality, more reliably.
Sounds good. Good response. And the following question is, how's the team morale? I'm assuming that kind of blends in with the last statement that you said.
Yeah. Well, so, it's a combination. Like, it's exciting. We're starting to be able to deliver stuff we've been talking about for a long time. On the other hand, people have been working long hours, and those long hours aren't likely to end really soon. And, you ask a question, so I'll give you an honest answer. And probably the biggest morale issue isn't so much working hard, but, I understand, like, people wish we had been finished a long time ago. Frankly, so do we. But, and it's frustrating to some people, but the team kind of gets a lot of criticism for that. And that's real hard. You got people who are just incredibly smart. They're experts in their field. It's not a small team. You wouldn't want to add much more to it. It's a very big team. So smart as they could be, experts at what they do, plenty of size on the team, working really, really hard. So the question is like, well, what else could they do? What else can we do? And the answer is not much, because we can stay focused on delivering quality, getting it done as fast as we can. And you know, it's not like we're going to say, you know, let's just give up on security because, you know, we can't get it done fast enough. Oh, you know, we can't get it done fast enough. Let's just remove smart contracts. Or should smart contracts be a little less secure, less robust? Like, you're going to answer me no in every one of those things, right? So the foundation, the main things of what it has to be, like, well, that's what it has to be because that's what's needed. And so that means it, you know, it takes a while. And so that's the truth. That's the hardest thing for the team, I think, is the criticism they get when, you know, sometimes you're working along against a plan and it blows up in your face a little bit because it's brand new technology and it hasn't been built before, and there's an element of it that was more complex than you could know, and they happen to be an expert in the field. So if they can't anticipate that, then nobody can, and so then it takes a while to fix it. And so that's just reality. That's our life. That's okay. But that's what it's like building brand new, never been done stuff before.
Thanks, David, for that response. Team morale is looking great. We do have some rough spots here and there, and I'm sure that community members or IOHK team members check in on the community every now and then. So negative comments probably do affect psyche at some degree. But I'm sure that the team is working hard, long hours, and things are going to get done eventually. And things are being done right now. So it's great to hear, and I'm very excited about the future. But moving on to the next question, any pulse or life signs of Shelley yet? And we answered that. David answered that earlier in the podcast. So please refer back to, we'll probably have timestamps here. So please refer back to the earlier parts of the podcast. We can move to question 4. And General Zod says, what type of information will be shared in the upcoming public team meetings that Charles mentioned? I'm not sure what upcoming public team meetings he's referring to.
That's what I was referring to earlier. So we have internal product development progress demos, and we'll record those and we'll make those available periodically. And when we do that, I'll also include a sort of a summary roll-up of the status of all that's been built. That'll be a written little report, status report, sort of a since last time status report. And around the same time, I'll also do an AMA where I will start with a summary of the same information about what was recently been completed, in case you'd rather hear it than read it. And then I'll ask any questions people have about what's been built. And so, you know, you'll be seeing live demos of what we built. So you'll know where we are, and I hope most of the time you're happy. And sometimes you're going to see a problem we've run into, and it's something, you know, and so you'll know exactly where we are. That's about as transparent as we could possibly be.
Perfect. Rick, do you want to get the next question?
Yes, I will. Thank you for that, General Zod 7. You're one of our frequent flyers, and lots of good questions there. The next question, I love this. It's from Reddit user Gimme the Coins. And the question is, what is the most professionally influential book you have ever read or listened to, or personally?
Wow. He's a big thinker. I would say there's a book called Sapiens by Yuval Harari. He also has a sequel called Homo Deus. And so I don't agree with everything he has in his books, but what's really interesting is that he tracks and describes the evolution of technology all the way back from when we were, you know, just past being primates, all the way up through the development of civilization, all the way up into modern day, and then projected out into the future. And so the reason I find that professionally relevant is because when you're building new technology, it's like they say in hockey, you can't skate to where the puck is. You have to skate to where the puck will be. And so in our technology world, we need to see the big picture of how things are evolving and skate to where the technology puck is going to be, and meet the needs that will be then. If we only ever meet the needs that are right now, or the needs that our competitor was meeting 6 months ago, then we don't get there. So I found his books really, really interesting. He has a really broad and insightful viewpoint.
Yeah, great deep understanding comes from reading. If something's worth writing down, it's usually very well thought out. And getting a good perspective of the influential authors out there is always very important.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that. And I'll get the next one from Brinker59. And Brinker59 asks, I'm going to summarize the question here, but they ask, I would like to know, how is it possible in 1 week, Charles Hoskinson comes out and says, hey guys, we're very close to release testnet by the end of Q1. It should be here. And it was said late February, early March in an AMA, and something comes up and he pushes the whole thing another 2 months or further, as we are still yet to see it. Where exactly was the error or discovery, specifically talking about Shelley? So basically the idea is the estimates were off. What we were talking about earlier. What's your take on that?
Yeah, and how does that happen? It's an interesting question. So it happens less in some kind of implementation and more in others. So an example, if you're now going to build an e-commerce solution, people have been building those for a long time. And so you ought to be able to do a pretty good job estimating the build of that. If you are in charge of that project and you miss it, then you're probably not very experienced. So maybe you ought to lose your job if you can't anticipate that, because people have been doing that for 20 years now. And so on the other hand, when you're building something that's brand new and it hasn't been built before, you have this plan worked out and it makes sense, and by the way, the expert, most senior, most knowledgeable minds in the industry working on this, right? And this is the plan that made sense. And a lot of other smart people looked at it and, yeah, that makes sense. And that's your plan. And you're rolling along, and something which looked like a few days or a week, and my goodness, there's some additional complications in there. And as it turns out, that piece of functionality, well, but it's linked over here too, and now it affects that other thing. Well, and if it affects that other thing, well, then that affects the third thing. And so now you have three complex pieces, which you're solving a problem you didn't anticipate on one, and it's affecting two or three other pieces of functionality, and therefore all those things need to change. And so sometimes, what looked like you're going to be done in a week or two turns into 2 or 3 months. And so I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just kind of trying to describe to you how this happens. This is the reality we live in. It isn't fun. I can tell you what, man, it is not fun to be Charles and go on an AMA because his absolute expert team just gave him an estimate of a deadline. And then that deadline goes past and it keeps going past. And he has to go back on and say, yeah, so, it's going to happen later. It's not so fun. And it's not like we were planning to mow a lawn and I can tell you, well, a tree fell over and slowed me down. It's not simple and easy, a real world scenario that you could explain, because it's in the depths and details of functionality that very few people in the world know about. It's not something you can explain easily, other than the way I just did. And some people are going to hear what I just said now and go, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I believe that. And other people are going to go, no, I think it's all a bunch of bullshit and they're just sitting around drinking Mai Tais. And I don't know, they're going to criticize us. All we can do is work really hard, make sure the output is high quality. And when we encounter stuff that we couldn't anticipate, get it done as fast as we can. I mean, that's really all we can do. There aren't people who are any smarter to work on this stuff. There aren't more hours of the day to work on it. And we can't yank out giant pieces of functionality in order to reduce the scope, because all the pieces that are needed are required. We're not going to have a 3-wheel car. It needs to be a 4-wheel car. We're not going to remove smart contracts. We're not going to there's no point in having a really good smart contract platform if the system as a whole has no performance, right? All those pieces have to go together. So there's no giant chunks we can pull out. And if it turns out that one of those chunks is harder, then we have no choice but to just bang our head against it until we get it done. And that's what we do, and that's how it happens. And I know it's frustrating.
Yes.
Believe me, it's more frustrating for us even than it is for you guys.
Yeah, and to follow up with David's answer, Philippe and I were talking with Marcus 2 episodes ago, and the developers have 16,800 GitHub commits for the Cardano ecosystem. So it's like the highest number short of Bitcoin or something like that. It's very, very high.
Massive amount of work going into Cardano. It is a huge project.
So, and guys and girls who are invested in the Cardano project and you're invested in ADA, I understand your concern, but this is part of the process. we are early adopters / early investors. So we have to ride the bumps as well. This is part of being part of something so novel. So if you really truly believe in the project, you've read up on it, you are really interested in the vision is being completed. It's not necessarily it's going to be done by this week. And to be honest, there's no really other blockchain project in the space that has completed it to the degree of rigor that Cardano wants to complete it. I mean, Ethereum is there, EOS is there. We're not plagiarizing white papers here. We're really building a project from ground up and building it the correct way. So enjoy the process or join us at a later time. I think that's the moral of this.
Yeah, and can I add to that as well? Brinker59 is absolutely right with this question, because there were deadlines set and they were missed, and they were set and they were missed, and they were set and they were missed, and it frustrated a whole lot of people. And they deserve to be frustrated. I mean, it's okay if they decide to get frustrated. That's on them. But maybe that's why we have David Esser now. We wouldn't have him if we didn't need him. Like, he came on 3 months ago. And it might not fix everything, but he's certainly an excellent communicator. And I appreciate having David on the podcast. And at the same time, I got to say, we now have a product manager on Cardano who we did not have before. So hopefully that will help solve some of these issues going into the future, because it was a very bumpy road up to this point.
Yeah. Well, thanks. And keep in mind, it's not just me. There's a whole team of people. I have the blessing to represent that team, but there's a whole team of people working to tighten up dev processes, tighten up product processes, move the entire development culture into more solution delivery, because it has to transition from that early research focus. And it's not. I'm not just being modest. There's a whole crew of people doing amazing work to deliver the product.
Okay. All right, cool. Okay,
we just have a couple more questions, and then we can wrap it up. So the next question is from Workhoff, and Workhoff says, "Is there a guiding principle that you try to follow for you and your team's work?"
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I could mention a couple. So one is just do it right. We're in a hurry. We're working hard, but we're not trying to just deliver a release that checks a box. We could have probably released a version of Cardano. It wouldn't have been so good and wouldn't have really solved the problem a while ago. But we want to really solve the problem. That's the goal. We want to have the best platform for building enterprise class decentralized apps. And the value of ADA is going to go up when the platform is truly valuable to people. So for those of you who are holding and hoping we hurry, you shouldn't want us to cut any corners. You want us to deliver the real vision, and then everything will work out fine for you. We're not always going to get it right, but we're going to keep at it until we do get it right. And so that's one, principle. And the other one, I would say, just fundamentally, we need to solve real problems for real people. And so that means constantly focusing on who is it that we're trying to serve? What do they need? How are we going to meet those needs? Are we meeting those needs? And if we are, then in the way we're meeting them, how's that better than how someone else might meet them? And so that's just fundamental. We can't lose sight on that. It's not about hash and Merkle tree, and it's about solving problems for real humans, real people, and that's fundamental to what we're doing.
All right, thank you, David. And just a reminder to viewers, this program is not financial advice. I want to put the next question comes from Winnipos, one of our Philippe and I's friends, Quentin. He also goes by Q. And you're not supposed to dox yourself on Reddit, but we all do it. We don't care. Right? I mean, I don't care, whatever. Right? All right, Quentin. So thanks for this question. And Quentin asks, to create a dApp or cryptocurrency on Attala, what kind of programming language do developers have to use? And it might be a little premature for this question, but I think that might be a good thing to ask. So what would you...
That is a really interesting question. Well, so the first thing I'll say is I'm not the product manager for Attala, and it would be really unfair of me to put words or especially features in his mouth. That would be like violating the code of product managers or something. What I would say is the products are intentionally sort of sibling products. They go naturally together. And whatever we can do to make sure that the development process and approach and tools for one are aligned with the other is a really, really good thing. And so, I mean, we have an ethos of interoperability in general within iOS and Cardano, and that's especially true when there's two products that we can kind of have close control over. So we'll make sure that those products work really, really well together, and that the development experience of building hybrid applications that use them both is efficient and high quality and a pleasure. But beyond that, it would be unfair to put words in my good friend Dynal's mouth. So I'm gonna not do that.
Okay, thanks. And also that takes care of question number 2 as well, because the second question there was, does Attala provide the tools to easily create supply chains? So obviously you can't answer that one. So we're on the last one, Philippe, also from Q, from Winnipos.
Okay. Oh, by the way, I want to remind everyone that he runs the Cardano podcast Français. So all the French-speaking speakers that want a Cardano podcast, go check out his channel.
All right, David, Philippe, thank you for that last question. And the next question, we had several questions from Q, who's Winnipos on Reddit. That's Quentin. He says, hi, I'm Quentin, here are my questions. Now, what I got to do is summarize questions. He asked a lot about Attala. And as David described before, he can't really speak much to Attala because that's not his product. But I think one of the key questions we need to answer to the viewers is Attala a private blockchain? And what is the difference between a private blockchain and a public blockchain? Can you tell us about that, David?
Sure. People have used the word private blockchain, or sometimes enterprise blockchains, that are used inside of companies or organizations or consortiums. And so let's talk first a little bit about a public blockchain. And so public blockchain is what it sounds like. It is possible for the public to use explorers and other tools to look all through that chain and to see much of the data that's there. And you could use those same tools to validate that data, so that if it's a public, say, blockchain registry, well, that property was registered and it's there and it's always going to be there. So same thing. That's why it matters for Bitcoin. If you buy Bitcoin and you own that Bitcoin, you want to be able to prove that you own that Bitcoin forever, and you don't want that to be controlled by anyone else and have anyone else ever say you can't own that or you don't own that. So that's public. The best ones are fully decentralized, which means that no central entity can control them. And you hope it's quite decentralized, because if it's, say, decentralized across a small number of nodes, well, then it might be possible that a hacker could gain control of those nodes, or it could be possible that someone could call up, you can get control of 15 entities and control a blockchain. Then maybe you call them up and offer them all $1 million or $1 billion or whatever that might be, and maybe you get control, and maybe you can earn more money than you had to pay them by getting control of it. So unlikely, but possible. And that's why people are comfortable when something really needs to be reliable and verifiable with public blockchains, because it's immutable, it's verifiable, and it's not controllable by one entity or by multiple entities. It follows the rules that are in the code that specifies the blockchain, and that's just how it goes. So then a private blockchain is a scenario where maybe the blockchain is amongst a consortium of companies. Maybe there are people who produce, I'm just going to make stuff up, the artichoke growers in California, and they like to combine their product and sell it through one interface so they can get the price. And so it's a consortium of companies that grow artichokes, and each of them is going to operate a node. And if one of them were to even once violate the rules of the contract between them, then the contract says the other companies can kick them out immediately kick them out of the network. And so you don't need 51% consensus algorithms necessarily, because you already have control of all the nodes. And you don't need things to be entirely public and verifiable, because if someone was maliciously adding incorrect information into that network, you'd probably be able to track that and accuse them of it and push them out. And so you give up things. When something requires 51% consensus validation, that's a lot of computation and communication in between different nodes. And so that costs you time, which means there's performance issues. Even just getting consensus among all of those nodes takes time in and of itself. And you give up a little bit of privacy because if it's all in the public blockchain. So if all of those nodes are behind firewalls and private, and only those nodes can communicate, no one can just decide, oh, I'm going to operate one of those nodes like you can in Bitcoin or other networks, public networks. You have to be invited in. So you can get more performance. You can get maybe some more custom capability and more control if those are the things that you want. In this case, you actually are one of those central entities, small group of entities, and actually the more control is something you want because you're building it for yourself or this small group. And so it makes more sense then to use a private blockchain. And so they also call them enterprise. Other examples are Corda R3, Hyperledger, Fabric, Ethereum Enterprise. And so they're different approach to things. What I've noticed is really interesting lately is that the more we talk about application use cases, the more we come back with the desire and need for hybrids. And so I think we're going to see more and more of that. And in fact, I don't think it's just going to be hybrids between public and private. I think that many applications will be hybrids between a variety of blockchain types, each contributing their own benefit. So that's a summary of the difference between the two.
Thank you very much for that. It was important to clarify because people were asking questions about, can you write code towards a private blockchain? And it's basically, no, not unless you're part of that private group, but you can write towards a public blockchain.
The last question we have for David is, what's next for Cardano?
Yeah, so the next thing you're going to see from us is the first set of recorded progress demos, development progress demos, which will be along with an AMA, which will be a summary from me, and then answer any questions that you have, and a status report. And you'll see that first set of things coming together in the beginning of June. So not long after, very soon after, we believe, it will be the testnet in that MVP form that we described. And so that'll start to happen, and that's going to be kind of exciting. We've been working toward that for a long time. And at some point soon will be the update and the quote unquote hard fork. You know that our hard forks are not as drama filled as they often are, because we make a smooth transition. But that will be coming soon. I don't want to put a date on it because I want to make sure that we have the exchanges ready for it. But you'll be seeing that too soon. So that's what's coming next.
That sounds good. David, it was a pleasure having you on the Cardano Effect podcast, episode 30. We had you on episode 20 as well for the Cardano 1.5. And we look forward to having you again in the future. You're welcome on this podcast whenever. We had David Esser, and he is the product manager at IOHK. He's getting things done. He's been with the company for a little bit over 3 months. I believe he joined in January. So he has really provided us a plethora of different information on this podcast. We have a lot of things to look forward to. Testnet is coming. Shelley is coming. Everything is coming. They're working, and the developers are working endless hours to get these products out, and they're being done the correct way. So please keep that in mind. With that being said, David, did you have any last words for the viewers of the Cardano Effect? If not, we can just wrap this up.
Sure. So people have been asking, about roadmap as well. And you're also going to see that coming out at the end of the month too. So we've announced that before, but it's looking really good actually. I'm excited to show it to you guys. So coming soon.
Perfect. Thank you for your time, David. We appreciate you. And until the next episode of the Cardano Effect. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys. It was fun. Appreciate you having me.